Good evening, welcome to another edition of the Gersnet Podcast, the independent Rangers podcast by fans, for fans, where all the content is absolutely free. Coming to you in association with Forrest Precision Engineering. I'm your host tonight, Brian Archer, and as always, we'd encourage you to get onto the Gersnet website and check out our forums for all your latest Rangers news and discussion. We're live tonight on the YouTube channel, and we'd ask that you continue to share the pod on social media, spread the word, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Before I introduce my guest for tonight, I need to give another mention to our partners over at Forrest Precision Engineering. They're a Glasgow-based engineering company who have been a big commercial supporter of Rangers for a number of years, and we're delighted to have them supporting the podcast. If you want more information about them, please visit their website at www.forestprecisioneng.com. They also have a stunning executive lounge in the Ibrox main stand, and for more information on that, please email the club at hospitality@rangers.co.uk. Right, now we bring in my guest. Joining me tonight is Rob Fawcett. Rob, how are you doing? Have you managed to get through the international break?
It's been a bit of a struggle. I'm one of these folk that, while I enjoy football, I only really enjoy watching Rangers play, to be honest. So it's nice to have the proper football back tomorrow. Although it was good to see Scotland qualify for another major tournament as well. I've got to put that out there. So, hopefully we can get a kind draw when we get to Germany.
It was good to see Scotland qualify, but a bit like yourself, international football and doesn't really do it for me, to be honest, unless it's a World Cup or a European Championship. But luckily we had plenty of Rangers news to keep us entertained and refreshing our Twitter feeds over the international break.
Did something happen during the international break? I don't know, did it?
I think there was a small announcement, just a small announcement that we'll probably cover on tonight's podcast. We might as well dive straight into it. Obviously, new manager, Philippe Clement. I think from what we gathered on social media, it seemed to be between Clement and Kevin Muscat. So, first of all, what was your thoughts on the appointment of Clement? Was it your preferred choice?
So the first thing I'm going to say is I'm by no means an expert on Belgian football or Japanese football. So I think the thing that intrigued me about both Clement and Muscat was actually reading around the style of play that they've got. And both of them, to be honest, I think I would have been happy with. The more digging that you do into Clement, I think you've got a really good period in Belgium where he's won 3 titles back to back with 2 different clubs, which is probably the thing that swung it in his favour for me. I think being able to do that in what is still a decent league in Europe is testament to the ability that he's got. He went in the early days, did a decent job at Monaco. Second season didn't go so well, which is obviously why we've got the opportunity to hire him. But I think looking at everything on paper, he was probably the pick of the bunch of the names we were linked with. I was just dreading being lumbered with a Lampard or the like.
Yeah, I think we're probably all of that same opinion in terms of some of the other names that were mentioned. Before we get on to talking about kind of the press unveiling and what he's had to say since arriving, I had a quick discussion on the kind of process of appointing the manager that we went through. Now, online, on social media, I've heard praise and criticism of the board in equal measure for how they've kind of handled the process. Some critical of the fact that it took so long. Some people saying they should have been prepared for this eventuality, given what happened before the previous international break. Others kind of saying the fact that it took so long was a good thing because it meant they were kind of thoroughly vetting all candidates. And we were also it was confirmed during the week that Graham Souness played a role in that recruitment process. What was your thoughts of the process in terms of what we were able to glean from social media and the fact that they got kind of Graham Souness involved? Yeah, that was a positive move. It's a good thing to be getting club legends involved in decisions like this.
So first of all, the Souness thing, actually, I think that was a really good bit of business by the board to get him involved. I think there's probably no better person out there that can communicate to the candidates for the job on what it's like to be a Rangers manager, what the pressure is going to be like, what the club's all about, and really look in those the eyes of the prospective managers to see which one you think is actually going to be up for the challenge. Because again, every manager is going to be a risk when you come to this club. I go back to the days when we got Paul Le Guen, we all thought that was a masterstroke at the time. He was going to come in and take us to the next level, and failed miserably in Scottish football. So I think every appointment is always going to be a risk. I think it does highlight, I guess, a lack of succession planning, which I think we'll touch on a little bit with that, with something we're going to talk about around the kind of director of football role within the club. Because ultimately, I think it sometimes look like we don't really have a plan in place should something happen. And again, you could look at that with the playing staff as well, where some clubs have 2 or 3 players identified for each position. So if we get an offer on a player, or if we lose a manager, then we can quite quickly line up the replacement. I think from my own personal point of view, I actually thought it wasn't that long a process, to be honest. You've seen some managerial appointments that have taken months. And I think it was good to get him in position in time for him to at least have a week before the game at the weekend. He's been able to come in, have a look at the players, and get to work. So I think, you've got to give the board credit when it's due to. I think by all accounts they've got a pretty decent manager out of it on paper. The fact that we have got Rangers people involved in the process is good as well. No doubt, I think people are always going to criticise the club regardless of what we do. So, I think we just got to take the small wins when they come along.
Yeah, obviously we had the official unveiling on Tuesday. Obviously, as is tradition, new manager was unveiled at the Ibrox Blue Room. What was your first impressions of Clement and what he had to say? I thought he didn't give much away, which was interesting, but what did you think?
So I think first of all, he looks a bit of a unit, which is good. He's got that kind of baldy Belgian nutter look around him. He certainly isn't somebody you'd want to mess with, especially with his assistant as he's come in and been unveiled as well now. But I think the more I actually listen to him, and again, this is me probably falling for or repeating history, I should say, with Rangers managers. The more that I listen to him, the more I actually like. I think he speaks with a quiet confidence, but also with an authority that other managers potentially haven't. He doesn't give a lot away, and I think there's been a couple of things where I've heard him make comments when people have asked him the same question, and it reminded me a little bit of the way Gerrard handled some of the press when he came in. But I certainly think he's a guy that loves football. He obviously described himself as a football animal, having watched, I think, all of the games that we played this year, before he even set foot in Scotland. I know. I saw the picture of him watching the Motherwell game, and I was like making sure that flight didn't turn round on Flight Radar, whatever it's called. But I think that just demonstrates the level of commitment he's got. That he's a winner. He wants to win. And I think that's the thing that's come across really clearly from him. So I think it will be interesting. I think the other thing that I really liked is when he talked about those 4 pillars that he wants to focus on. He wants us to be the best. So he wants us to be the best technical, tactical, physical and mental team. And I think that's how you win championships. That's how you win leagues. If you're the best in all those areas, then the cups, the leagues are going to come. And I think if he can implement that kind of attitude and style across the team, then I think we've been in safe hands, to be honest. I think first impressions are good so far anyway. Proof's going to be in the pudding once we start to see the football.
Yeah, that's always the case. The interesting thing for me was he seems to have a kind of steely determination about him, that he's got a very clear plan in his head and he knows how to get there because he's done it before at Bruges and at Genk. So that's obviously a good sign. One of the kind of things I picked up on in the press conferences that I've heard him speaking is he keeps his cards very close to his chest. There was a few times when journalists were asking him specific questions about what he's seen in training or what he's going to change, and he kind of bats it back with things like, I've seen things but it's not for your ears or your eyes kind of thing, and it's very different to the previous manager, Michael Beale. I remember, just over or just under a year ago, sitting talking to Alex on the World Cup pods when Beale had just arrived, and we were all kind of saying how refreshing it was, that how open Michael Beale was with the press and how much he was willing to share. And Clement very much seems like the opposite of that. For you, does any of that really important? Is it, by the end of Beale's tenure, his openness with the press was kind of used as a bit of a stick to beat him with. So it's interesting that Clement's very much a different character to that. Does any of that kind of carry any weight for you?
Well, I think for me, it's just all about breeding confidence. I think you're right on the Beale front. I absolutely loved it when he first joined and how open he was when he was talking. I think as you go to the latter part of his tenure, I think that you're right. That was something that definitely went against him. It became a contradiction every time that he spoke, which was the frustrating thing. Again, all the talk about letting the handbrake off. It's going to be a fast flowing, attacking football team that we put out in the park, and it never really got there. I never really got there with him. So I think from that point of view, it is because whatever message the manager portrays in the press, he's got to back that up when his team goes onto that pitch, because that's how you build confidence in the fans. And I think, as we've seen recently, if you lose the fans, then 9 times out of 10, you're never really going to win them back. And I think regardless of what Beale would have done, even if we'd limped through and he'd won the League Cup, I still think there was going to be a large portion of the fans that were going to be against him anyway, because of that very point where he said too much. He was probably a little bit too open. He contradicted himself quite a lot. So I think, again, very early impressions are that Clement seems to be very straight to the point. I think he does say the minimum in front of the press, which is great. He'll answer the question, but he won't use 5 million words like Beale would do. He'll maybe use 3 or 4 and then close it down. And I do like the fact that he kind of, spoke about the medical side of things today, and how close he likes to work with the medical department around players and injuries, because, for him, I think he sounds like a massively detail-oriented guy, and he wants to control everything that's going to happen at that club, or at least have the insight as to what's happening in every department. And I think that can only be a good thing, because ultimately the closer he works with our medical staff, the closer he's going to understand the players, which means he's going to know how hard they can push them. And he's going to know when we need to remove a player from the starting lineup so that they don't get injured. And we're without them for maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks, where I think there's probably been a tendency to over-rely on some players and have them playing through niggles and stuff, where, that's maybe not the best thing in the long term for the team. It's been a very short-term view. So I think, time is going to be the thing that we can judge him over. But certainly, those first impressions are building confidence with me personally anyway. I think I like the way that he's engaging. I like what he's saying. And I think his observations about the team have been pretty similar to what us fans have seen. There's been a lot of talk around the style of play and what he's seen within the team and what he's identified, the good and the bad. And hopefully the approach that he's taken, where, listen, we've got to focus on the worst thing or the important thing to improve on 1 week. Once we've sorted that, we move on to the next bit. And it's not a case of trying to change everything. From day one, it's going to be incremental benefits that we'll see, and incremental improvements, hopefully, over the next few weeks once he's started to work with the players.
Yeah, the other interesting thing that I quite like, that I've heard from him on a couple of occasions this week, is he keeps talking about wanting to create a family within the team and the club. And I know that can sound a bit cliche and a bit naff to some people, but it kind of reminds me of when you hear people talk about managers like Mourinho and Ferguson and working under them, they always spoke about how they created that kind of squad unity of it's us against everyone else. It's us in this building, in this club, and everyone else is against us. And that's how they drive to kind of win trophies, because they kind of foster that mentality. I'm not obviously comparing Clement to any of those managers, but I think that kind of fostering that kind of mentality for me is what breeds success.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about it. If your team's not playing well, if you've got that tight knit atmosphere and family feel within the club, you're going to fight for each other. You'll roll up your sleeves and you'll fly into that tackle maybe to try and cover a mistake that somebody's made, because you're fighting for each other. You feel as if you're in it together. I think in some cases this year, it has looked a bit disjointed. I mean, the Betis game in the second half is probably the only 45 minutes of football that we've seen this year where we looked like a team. And I think you can have a group of individuals, and they might be the most talented in the world, but if you're up against a well-drilled unit that fight for each other, 9 times out of 10, the people that are less talented are going to win because they're going to work harder, they're going to go that extra mile, and unless you've got that foundation right, you can be the best talented player in the world, but if you don't work hard, you're never going to win anything. We've seen over the years, Greece, Denmark, to name a couple, winning Euro champions, becoming European champions because of the work ethic they've had within those squad, and they've had some talented players to go with it. So you're absolutely right. I think, making sure that we create an atmosphere within the club where everybody's fighting in that one for that one goal, we're a team, and that we're fighting for each other is absolutely critical moving forward.
Yeah, and in terms of creating that kind of family atmosphere, one of the roles that's still to be filled that was touched on at the unveiling was the director of football, or technical director, or whatever kind of title you want to give it. I think we all know the kind of role that is being referred to there. And James Bisgrove, the CEO, sort of gave an update to say that they were actively hoping to appoint a director of football kind of imminently. Now, for me, this role is just as important as the manager. This role is all about succession planning for me. We should always have a plan in place, regardless of whether we need to part with a manager, or if a manager's doing really well, the chances are he's going to get picked up by a Premiership team, a la Steven Gerrard. So that should always be someone's role to succession plan in terms of the manager and also the squad. For you, what's your thoughts on the role and the importance of it in modern day football?
I think it's absolutely critical, because ultimately it means that you can, the manager, the players, the youth setup all become cogs of one machine. You can replace one cog with another, and the machine still functions. I think, as we've seen, when we don't have that structure set from the top down, it all gets a bit disjointed, and there doesn't seem to be, a clear direction that everybody's pointing to or pointing in from a club point of view. And I think that's something that we've missed. Ultimately, we did have Ross Wilson. Probably the less said about him, the better, because I think there are elements there where a really strong director of football would have made decisions that were in the best interest for the football club. We could have taken money from Morelos, money from Kent, and reinvested that in the playing squad. And really got that player trading model set up. At the moment, our player trading model is we get lucky with a Bassi, or we sell Patterson, who's come through the ranks and has only played a few games. That isn't sustainable, because you're not going to get those gems unless you've got the foundations in place where the youth team are hoovering up the best youth in the country, and that they've got a pathway to the first team. And that all comes from having that structure in place with the director of football working really closely with the manager of the club, so that there's a clearly defined identity that we've got as a footballing club. And I think that's what we lacked. And I think it's really important that we do get somebody in that is very well respected. And I know the boy through Brighton has been linked, and if we can pull that one off, then what an amazing opportunity that is for us. But by rights, he should be well out of a league, just because of the job that he's done down in Brighton. There'll be other teams that will be looking to replicate that, but they're a fine example of a system that works. As I understand it, they sign a player, they tell them they're not going to play for maybe 6 months, and then they gradually bed them into the team because they know that the player that they're replacing is going to be sold at the end of the season. And by that time, he's used to the style, the play, his teammates, and it's not a big, massive transition at that point. It's like he's just fitting into the jigsaw puzzle because the other guy's left. That's ultimately what a club like Rangers should be doing, because player trading model is how we're going to be profitable. You look at Ajax as well. The amount of teams that they've turned out over the years, because they've got a clear structure from top to bottom, right down to the youth academy, play the same way all through the club, so that by the time they hit the first team, they've got a really clear pathway, and that they understand that that's a stepping stone. And ultimately, as much as it pains me to say, that's what Rangers are these days for a lot of these players. It's a pathway to the Premiership. A massive, massive institution. You're not going to get pressure like it. when you come and play for us because of the size and scale of the club. But ultimately, the riches on the Premiership are one of the top 5 leagues. Unfortunately, we can't compete with those types of wages, but we need to enjoy those players while we've got them, and that all stems from having, that structure at the top of the club, right? And I think it's also very important that they're aware of just what it means to be a Ranger as well. So I think that's one thing that we've lost from the club over the last few years, right through the whole team and right through the whole organisation of Rangers, is that we're losing lots of good Rangers people. And that's really difficult to replace, because they're the ones that help keep the players in check sometimes, the people behind the scenes. And it's the stuff that we don't get to see. But, Jimmy Bell is a prime example. There wasn't a player within that squad that didn't get reminded every single day of all the great players that came before them and what it actually meant to wear that jersey. And I think not just the director of football, but all the departments need to have people like that within the club, because that's starting to get dripped away and it's getting watered down. And I think we need to get more Rangers people in the building again.
Yeah. Is it any cause for concern for you that we are looking to appoint a director of football after we appointed a manager? Bisgrove kind of mentioned in the unveiling that Clement would have an input in the director of football role and who that would be. Is there any concern that potentially, whilst the director of football and the manager need to work closely, but they could they potentially be too close, and that it could potentially turn out that the director of football is the one having to essentially relieve the manager of his duties or plan for his replacement at some point? Is that any kind of concern for you?
I think football's like any other business. I think these folk do put friendship to one side when it comes to that sort of stuff, and you might get a little bit more time because you're your mate, but ultimately, if the director of football doesn't do his job and we're not getting results on the pitch, then it really falls onto the manager. That's the first point of call at that, and the next point of call would be if we keep getting it wrong by appointing incorrect managers, then the director of football will go. So I think that type of stuff, while it could be a concern for me, it's not too worrying. The only thing that would be worrying is if we hire somebody in that role that has a completely different mindset from the manager at the moment, because that would just be a disaster, and I wouldn't put it past us to make that kind of decision based on what's happened previously with appointments. But you've got to think that we've gone through this process, we've identified Clement. I think they've got to have an idea as to who that shortlist is for the director of football if they're talking about it being imminently. So I imagine that may well have been part of the discussion with the people around the table as they were going through the interview process. That, look, these are some of the names, these are the individuals that we've got on the shortlist. Once you become manager, we want your input as to who you think is going to be the right fit to work with.
It'll be interesting to see how that develops. Now, I think as we kind of hinted at earlier, there was another press conference today to preview the weekend's game against Hibs. One of the interesting things I took from that was he went into a little bit more detail about how he wants his team to play, in terms he spoke about being brave on the ball, playing forward, not playing the safe pass, no lateral passes, and not being worried about giving the ball away. I mean, all that must have been music to your ears, Rob.
It was absolutely brilliant, actually, to be honest, because I think it's, the comment, I can't remember which manager it was, but the one that was talking about Borna, that he shouldn't be playing for the Croatia team. I think that kind of sums up, I think, some of the frustrations that we've had at Ibrox over the recent period, where it is about taking a chance, and I think sometimes, and again, this probably comes from the management team, sometimes players look as if they're so scared to make a mistake that they just play within themselves. And you're never going to win anything by not taking risks. As I keep saying to people I'm working in my son, you're never going to be perfect throughout life and throughout whatever sport or whatever career you do. You're going to make mistakes along the way. The biggest thing is how you respond and how you react to those mistakes. And I think he made that comment as well. If a player's continually making mistakes and doesn't learn from it, then absolutely you've got a bit of a problem. But if a player makes a mistake because he's trying to play the ball forward to create a chance for us to score, then you've got to then just roll the sleeves up, get the ball back, whatever it may be, and get that phase of play going again. So I think it's been really interesting listening to him talk about what he wants to do. And again, the constant theme is high press, high energy, dominating the ball, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that flows through the team, because I think the players have now got a responsibility to perform. We've got a new manager in place. If we see the same things happening again, then it confirms what some people have been saying about the players, is that they're not good enough. And you're looking at the likes of the ones that are getting it recently, the Tavs, the Goldsons, the Barisics. If they can't be given confidence to improve on the perceived areas of weakness that most of the fan base have with them, then I don't think, regardless of their status within the squad, I don't think Clement's going to take any prisoners. Looking at him and listening to what he's been saying, everybody starts with a blank sheet, as he said, and it's now going to be up to the players when they step on that pitch is to prove to us that they deserve their position. And I think it's going to be really interesting over the next few weeks, because it will take weeks. Let's face it. It's not going to, like you said, he's not Harry Potter with a magic stick. It's going to take time for him to impress his ideas upon these players and build the confidence, because there was another comment that he made. You can see that a lot of the players don't have confidence just now. So it's how quickly he can build that up. But I think, it's going to be really interesting. I'm not expecting miracles tomorrow, but I think over the next few weeks, then if he can play the way that he's talking, we should actually be happy watching Rangers again for a while.
Yeah, here's hoping. It's interesting that kind of what he's saying, and he's kind of already identified issues that kind of fans and we've been talking about for a while, in terms of that safe passing, that kind of not always playing forward, not always kind of taking the kind of risky move, if you like. And you said there it's not going to change overnight. He's going to need time, and you're not expecting miracles tomorrow. But looking at tomorrow, what can we reasonably expect in terms of any kind of changes that we might see, or little tweaks in systems, or styles of play, just given the kind of short period that you have to work with the players?
So I think it might be more of the same, to be honest, at the moment. I think I went to Love Street for the St Mirren game, and it was a really weird atmosphere going into the ground, because I was kind of half talking to myself, going, what the hell have you done? Why are you going to another game where it's not on your season ticket? It's but we actually we turned in a decent performance that day, and against a very good St Mirren team, and we won. I think tomorrow it's just hoping that the players can take a bit of a bounce. They've got a point to prove now. There's a lot of them that are going to step onto that pitch tomorrow for however long they get, whether it's the full game or 10 minutes off the bench. They need to be shown very, very quickly, not just to the manager, but to the fans, that they deserve to be part of the club long term. Because ultimately, there's some of the new signings that really haven't really set the heather alight. And they've recognised themselves that they've been here long enough now to make an impact and make an impression. But there's some of the players that have been here as well that haven't exactly covered themselves in glory this year. And I'm not talking about the usual ones that will get the battering around Tav and Borna and stuff, but like Nico Raskin, he hasn't exactly played to the level that I think he's capable of. We've had Cantwell out injured, so there's lots of players there that have a point to prove. It's going to be a tough game, because Hibs are on a bit of a decent run, but again, it's like I always say, we should begin at these games and treat the teams with contempt. I remember when we used to beat Hibs 7-0 at Ibrox. And that's the kind of attitude we need to begin into these games. We give Scottish teams, I think, sometimes far too much bloody respect. And I think, and I'd like to think that, that's one of the things that people have got across to them, that actually go on and stamp in their throat and then just twist it a wee bit while they're down.
Yeah, you mentioned that the Hibs are actually on a good run of form themselves. They've not lost a game since, or domestically, they've not lost a game since August. New manager Nick Montgomery seems to have given them new manager bounce, and by all accounts, he's got them playing some attacking football. Is this in some ways the ideal game in terms of, they'll be right up for it? They're in a good run of form themselves, so it's actually quite a good game to have as Clement's first game because it'll give him a good gauge of where the team's at.
Well, hopefully, I'm gonna steal Craig's stats that he'd tagged us on Twitter just to keep him happy, so that he can see that we've used them. But Beale's first game was against Hibs. We beat them 3-2. Warburton's first game was against Hibs. We beat them 6-2. So, I think that the only manager not to beat them, I think it was McCoist. It was McCoist through his first game against Hearts. Sorry. So I think we've got a decent record against Hibs. The only problem we've got is the players. What set of players are going to turn up tomorrow? Is it the team that got absolutely battered against Aberdeen, or is it the team that played with a little bit more confidence and played a little bit better against St Mirren? I think hopefully because of the manager change, the atmosphere at Ibrox should be a bit better. Because ultimately it's a really hard place to play if the fans aren't on side. I think Montgomery's done a decent job. They've obviously got players with pace like Boyle, and again, I think I've got nightmares of him because of what happened in the semi, just before Gio took over. So I think there are definitely aspects that we need to be worried about and careful of, but equally, I think if we focus on playing to the best of our ability, we should beat them. We should beat them comfortably. They're sitting 7th in the table, I think, at the moment. So while they're on a decent run, they're a team that we should be dispatching of, especially at Ibrox. So hopefully there's not too much trouble for Clement to get under the table.
Yeah, you mentioned there what kind of players going to turn up. Now, a few of the players that we should have back in the squad returning from injury or Cantwell, Danilo and Ryan Jack. Now, they said at the press conference that although they'll be in the squad, they weren't all able to play 90 minutes, but we should see them play some part in the game. Now, it's good to see players coming back from injury. Do you think we'll see much in the way of changes to the starting 11 in terms of what was put out against St Mirren? Do you think we might even see some of the youngsters, Rice, McCausland? Do you think, I think he's got a track record of giving youth a chance. So what kind of team do you think he'll put out?
I wouldn't be too surprised if it wasn't far away from the team that started against St Mirren. I think that gives him a comfort that it's a team that's played together and it's not too drastically changed for his first game in charge. I would love to see maybe McCausland start, because again, I think when we've played well this year, it's been when we've had a bit of pace on the wings, and I think that helps us stretch teams a little bit. Now it might be slightly different because we're going to be at Ibrox. Probably Hibs might come and sit in a little bit, so there's not going to be much space in behind. But I think I'd also love to see young Rice getting more minutes as well, because I think he could be a really interesting player for us if he can continue to develop the way that he's developing, and the fact that he's only 16, 17, and he's a big boy. He can pass the ball well. So I'd love to see a couple of the youngsters being given a chance, just like Lovelace was against St Mirren, because that came a little bit out of the blue. I don't think anybody expected him to start that game. I think you're right. The fact that we'll have the likes of Cantwell, Danilo, Jack back are good for the squad. Whether they're going to get rushed in and started, I don't know, but it's good to at least know that they'll be sitting there, that if we need to call upon or get them some minutes back in their legs after being out, then they're going to be part of the squad and potentially part of the team that they can play a bit. But yeah, I think out of all the youngsters, the likelier to start, I think, would be McCausland, just because of the position that he plays and the pace that he could bring to the wing.
Obviously, the most important thing tomorrow is the 3 points. I think that's got to be a non-negotiable. We can't afford to be dropping any more points. But is it also pretty important that we do see some signs, even if it's just small signs of what the new manager's trying to implement in terms of style of play, or even if it's just little tweaks? I know we've said we can't expect to see an overhaul of the style of play completely in the first game, but is it important that we do start to see even just small signs of that?
I think so. I mean, he's had a relatively short period of time to work, but I think the interesting thing will be to actually look at how he is on the touchline. Because ultimately, I think I anticipate that if he's trying to get his stamp on the team, that he'll probably be up maybe barking orders to a few players to say, to get his tactics and positional preference over to the players when they're on the pitch. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him out on the touchline quite a bit. But you're right. I think we've got to see a little bit of improvement, and I think naturally that will happen. You talk about the new manager bounce. There's the players, as I said previously, have got a lot to prove tomorrow. So I think you'll naturally see a little bit more from them. And again, it comes back to how he's been speaking to them for this week. If he's been continually, trying to build their confidence up and encourage them to take that risk and play forward a bit quicker and become a bit more of an attacking team rather than the kind of horseshoe type setup that we've been so used to over the past wee while, then you will start to see improvement. And I think the players have got it because they've done it in fits and starts this year. There have been some great little passages of play in some of the games. I think the one thing that I did love to hear from him as well is around that organisation piece. So while he wants to play this dominating attacking football, it's got to be from a structure. And that's really good to hear as well, because it means that it's not going to be all out attack. It means that we're going to have some semblance of solidity at the back, which is what we've lacked really for the last wee while. It's that back line that has been a little bit dodgy. And the great thing is he's a defender by trade. So you'd like to think the likes of Tav, Goldson, Davies, Suter, Barisic, Ridvan, they're all going to be able to kind of learn from his experience of when he was actually playing for Bruges and Coventry, etc. So the fact that he's been there, he's done it. I think again he's played in the Champions League with Bruges as well back in the day. It's going to be good for him to be able to pass on his experience of that to those players as well, because he's been in their position. He knows what to do. He knows how a backline needs to work. So hopefully that means that they'll start to play a little bit better as a unit as well.
Just to finish up our preview of the game, give me a score prediction.
I'd love to say 4-1. There we go. I'm going to go balls out. 4-1.
I like it. Going bold. I like it. Right, before we finish up, did you have a shout out you wanted to give a quick mention to, Rob?
Yeah, I did, mate. Thank you. So I'm a member of the Arthur Newman Loyal supporter bus based in Mulgai. We've now got space every kind of home game on the bus. So if there's any listeners, any viewers out there that listen to the podcast regularly, we leave for the Bunbury. Feel free to get in touch with us on Twitter at ANLRSC. And we can give you the details of the bus, etc. So, we'll be leaving for the Bunbury pub at 1:45 on Saturday for the game. But yeah, if you're in the Mulgai and Bearsden area, feel free to look us up and check us out, and we'll be happy to welcome you on board.
Definitely check that one out, guys. Right, I think I'll call it time there. All that's left for me to do is to thank my guest, Rob. Thanks as always.
Cheers, mate. Pleasure to see you again.
You too. As always, we've been live tonight on the YouTube, but the podcast will be available tomorrow on all podcasting platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher, and we'd ask that you leave us a rating on your preferred podcasting app. We'll be back on Sunday evening. I think it's Craig, Stuart and Gary that's on Sunday to look back on Saturday's match. Until next time, bye for now.